February 18, 2020 to order. Would you please call the roll?
Coos.
Here.
Gade.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Brings us down to communications. The only thing I think that I would like to do is at this particular time clear up and talk a little bit about a comment I made the other night. So at last night's special meeting, I attempted to respond to the citizens' inquiry regarding the city's port RFP process and would like to offer some clarification. Should the City Council pursue concessions or lease agreement for the redevelopment of the port, and the final agreement between the third party and the city will require an ordinance in 2 readings and a 30-day effective period. And of course, that's a big if. We haven't got there yet. The proposed concession period is for a minimum of 20 years, and all agreements in excess of 5 years require approval ordinance before going into effect. The qualified voters of the city may approve or reject any ordinance passed by the City Council by means of a referendum petition. The City Council has made no indication that they will place an ordinance for port redevelopment on a ballot. Additional information on a referendum petition process can be found in and contacting the city clerk. So I just wanted to make sure that that was a clarified statement because it was a little vague when I made it. And so that's where we're at. I don't have any other communications on the table, so that brings this person to be heard. Devin.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I am part of the financial management team over at Metlakatla Power and Light, and I am here today just to answer any questions that you may have related to the proposed intertie project between Metlakatla and Ketchikan. I'd also like to say that in relation to the request for the 90-day extension of the DNR, we are perfectly fine with an extension. However, we feel over at Metlakatla Power and Light that 90 days is more than necessary and would be more comfortable with less time given the turnaround that we would like to have on this project, and we feel that we can answer any questions in less than a 90-day period. So, maybe 30 days I think is something that we'd be more comfortable with. But again, thanks for having me, and I'll be here to answer any questions that I can that come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Devin. Abby.
Hello, Abby Bradbury, 955 Forest Avenue, and I'm here just to speak on an experience that I had. Most of you know me. I just returned from 6 weeks in traveling around South America, including landside tours and also portside tours, and being able to watch operations of other small communities interacting with tourists. And I felt with the process you guys are going through now on trying to find minimal ways or ways to improve Ketchikan with minimal cost, that maybe I could give just a few things that I noticed from a tourist side, but also as knowing the operation and tour operator side. So the first thing I recognized was no matter who you talk to, either if they were involved in tourism, had nothing to do with tourism, they all had a positive attitude about it. No matter if you were asking questions, directions, trying to find somebody who spoke English because you were needing to ask a specific question that you couldn't quite get in Spanish, they were always willing to help answer your questions and always recommend good things around town and places that they enjoy as a local to see. The other thing I noticed there, and that's just talking with the operators, that most of these places have many governing bodies over tourism. I know you guys are over it as well. We have Ketchikan Visitors Bureau that participates in that. But they have someone that is a liaison between the city, who may not know the ins and outs of every little thing, or the local government versus the operators or the Ketchikan Visitor Center or chambers or organizations like that. So this person was always on the pier communicating with security teams there, making sure they had the security measures they needed if they needed anything, but also they were reporting back any issues that the port team noticed about the cruise line. So if they noticed the cruise line is now not staying within their barriers, that person would then take that concern to the cruise lines or vice versa to the city to try to find a resolution between both parties. They also do that the same with tour operators and the local side, which I know later on they're talking about the tourism best management practice, which fully support in that. But I think what's lacking is kind of the understanding of the whole picture, being on the city side and the tourism side, and trying to mesh them together. I feel like you either know one side or the other, but not all inclusive.
So was this a person of the tourism side or a person of the government side?
So they worked for the government. So in one place, Ushuaia has one, and that person works for the local government as the liaison. So they're responsible for going out there, finding if there's any concerns. People can approach this one person, and they could talk to either party about what was happening. So it was kind of somebody who had to understand the city operations side, budgeting, all that stuff, but also the ins and out of the actual tourism side, which can go, as you're noticing now, a lot more in depth than what people originally realized. With that, I think maybe we could start closing the gaps amongst the people who are against tourism and the people who are. One thing we are lacking right now is everybody having the pride of Ketchikan and wanting to share it with no matter who, if it's their family, friends, tourists coming into this community. And I personally, as a local, would love to see kind of that excitement and love for Ketchikan come back and share it with other people. The second thing is recycling. Some of the cities I visited are technically third world, and they have a way better recycling program than we do. Ours is not really existent. I know this is a hard task here because it is expensive, but there has to be a way for us to somewhat chime in on that and help save the world. It really is becoming a problem. Just traveling the ocean, I mean, we're out miles and miles and miles away from the land, and there's trash in the water. Water bottles, plastic, all of that stuff. And that we could be contributing to that. It could fall off the barge as it's going down and be in the water. So maybe trying to find other ways to start a recycling program here would be the best thing. Two things that I have right off the top of my head would be a refillable water station throughout the town. I know I traveled and I used a water bottle every day. The stations were everywhere down there. The second was smoking areas. Cigarette butts, I don't know if anybody's walked downtown in the past 24 hours. It is atrocious with how many are down there. I know it's winter, there's nobody really down there, but it's the same way during the summer. So maybe finding designated smoking areas with appropriate receptacles for smoking, and then having port security actually enforce, please go to that area. There's disposal, and it kind of teach them, hey, here, we want to protect our land and we want to make sure that the trash ends up in the right place. So we already have the port security down there. There's a lot of times that they're just hanging around. They could easily direct people to appropriate places to do the smoking. Third, this might sound crazy, but we totally need whistles for port security. I always thought this was a stupid idea until I got down there and realized how important it is and how constructive it really is in getting people's attention from down the road or right next to you, and everybody would look at that whistle and you want to correct your behavior even if you're not doing anything wrong because you heard it. We're used to when you hear a whistle, look or fix whatever's going on. So I think that would be a great tool. I also think it would kind of make the impression of town a little bit better. When you're down on the dock, it's busy, buses are rolling, people are yelling, dock staff or port security's yelling. I think it would just be a professional way to be able to get people's attention and then be able to direct them to correct their behavior.
So you saw people using whistles in the places that you went?
Yeah, so down there, even the police department is equipped with whistles, and that's how they, if they're away from you, that's how they're getting your attention. They use it for traffic, for if you're walking across the street at an inappropriate time, or when the, what do you call them, the lights, what do you call it, walking lights?
Crosswalk light.
There you go. When the lights were green, they were constantly on you with that whistle. Even on the port, if you went into the bus lane, because down there they have designated passenger and designated bus lanes, and you are not allowed to cross. They would be correcting your behavior with that whistle. But it wasn't, they didn't require a lot of yelling. It was that whistle, and then everybody was like, oh, get in line with what they're asking. It's pretty simple. So it's just something I know. I listened to it like, you hear a whistle and it's loud, everybody's looking. It's a simple cost, and I think it would really enhance that side of it. Maybe more people would listen on the pier as well. I know a lot of port security has frustrations because nobody really listens to them. Maybe if they can have that added loudness or effectiveness, maybe it would help.
I think we had whistles at one time.
Not in my 9 years of being here. We've never had whistles. And if you did, I would have totally supported it then. Fourth, shrubs. The difference that plants and trees can make in a town is quite impressive. If we could expand on the plants, shrubs, and trees in all over town, not just in the park or just in a few planters, but really develop a nice garden per se, or hanging planters from most buildings, or we already have a team out there watering planters. Be easy for them just to go from every building, or something of that nature to kind of enhance and brighten up the sidewalks that we have here. The fifth thing is guide programs. In South America, you have to go to school for 1 to 3 years before you can become a licensed tour guide. These guides are the only people who can actually go into national parks, local parks that are deemed necessary for a guide, or buildings. Like, for instance, Creek Street would be considered one, Saxman. You have to be a licensed guide before you could actually guide a tour in those places. I believe this should be implemented here in a shorter time frame, obviously, to ensure the correct information is being given to guests across the city. Maybe work with the Ketchikan Visitors Bureau to create a program and have companies register their guides through cities for a very minimal fee. They would need to take the class, pass a test, and then they could guide here. And it's just a simple way to get the correct information out. I don't know, I walk around town quite a bit during the season, and some of the information guides are giving out, I even find completely bonkers. Like, I don't know where they pulled that information out of. This would then, if you did hear somebody guiding who was not registered, one, you can then crack down a little bit on them and say, hey, this is the information that you need to give out. Second, if they are registered on there and they are giving that information out, again, you can also kind of put your hand down and say, this is the information, the image we want to get out about Ketchikan, and you need to stick by it. Sixth thing, roadways. Believe it or not, they have much better roads than we do here. I know that has nothing to do with you guys, but if we could fix the potholes, that would be great. Besides repaving, I noticed there that they have timed crossing lights, or more crossing guards than what we have here. People do watch these lights a lot more than you would think. I, not being used to it here, would kind of blast on through it, and I was the only one, and I was getting the whistle. No cars were coming, but other people watch it. You would be surprised. So maybe trying to work with the city to increase these throughout town. They don't need to go like where you push the button and every time somebody's there it's going to go off. No, it's a set time frame so that traffic can continue to move. Let that group side build up, and then at a designated time, it will go for 60 seconds, and then you're back to stopped, and the traffic could move.
So was it a timer? Did it have a sensor for human body?
No, it didn't. It was set on a time schedule so that traffic kept moving until it was that designated time, and then you would cross.
And it was the RFP thingies?
Yeah, it has the walking line.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
continue.
Sorry. But I think we need to work with the city or the state on creating a program that can help move traffic a little bit faster, but then also get people off of the port and into town. Almost done, I promise. The last one I want to talk about is the buildings downtown. A lot of cities down there require the buildings to be painted no matter what condition it is, every 2 to 3 years. And they said just to keep the look decent. People are coming here to see the town, and having a freshly painted building. I know purple down on Diamonds International is not the greatest color, but it looks really nice that it is fresh and clean, and it stands out and attracts me to even want to go in there versus the other stores to the left of it that are really run down. I know this would be an increased cost for businesses, and that's not the intention, but it could bring that view up of the town from the ship. And other words, I personally, as soon as I landed and drove through town, that was the first thing that stood out to me, that the town looked very drabby or run down. And I, as a local, don't want to see that. I don't want to share that with people. I want it to be fresh, vibrant, and show the love that I have for Ketchikan in the building. I know the cost, I mentioned that. Maybe on the years that the company does paint, they could receive some sort of tax credit from the city to compensate for that. Nothing large, but just kind of an incentive to get them to paint their building. And it's one less thing you guys have to worry about, finding somebody to do or finding a budget to paint all the buildings downtown. These are just some simple things that I noticed, and if you have any questions, I'll be around. I'm not going to stay for the meeting, but I'm pretty sure you all know how to get a hold of me if you need to.
So if you have those in electronic format, could you send them to?
I could type them up, yes.
Sure. That'd be great.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
sharing that, Abby.
Yeah,
That was
thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Donito, Odell, and Sam McQuarrie.
Sam McQuarrie for City Homeless Services.
Antonina Odell for City Homeless Services. I just wanted to stop by tonight with Sam in case anybody had any questions about our grant application. We'll be here for a while, so if you guys have any questions, we're available.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's all we have signed up, so that brings us on down to consent agenda. If there is no objections, I would like to move 6A, the budget transfer for the Crosswalk Awareness Campaign, and 6B, the ordinance number 2019-04, approving the Verizon Wireless Executive Agent Agreement. Second reading.
No objection, here you are.
Move to consent.
Second. Been moved and seconded to consent. Would you please read the items?
Approval of the minutes, regular city council meetings of January 23rd, 2020 and February 6th, 2020. Exempting procurement of the annual software maintenance agreement for the First City Libraries Consortium from the competitive bidding written quotation requirements of the Ketchikan Municipal Code by Cersei Dynex. Amendment number 3, final to contract number 1918 port reconfiguration and execution strategy, Bermello, Ajamil and Partners, Inc. Exempting the procurement of fire and police departments portable radios for the fire and police department from the competitive bidding written quotation requirements of the Ketchikan Municipal Code Motorola Solutions. Resolution number 20-2769 supporting the Alaska Salmon Hatchery Program. Exempting the procurement of annual hosted IP business phone system professional engineering maintenance and support services for the telecommunications division from the competitive bidding written quotation requirements of the Ketchikan Municipal Code, ECG, Inc. Budget transfer, Ketchikan Pedestrian Safety and Crosswalk Awareness Campaign, and ordinance number 20-1904 approving Horizon Wireless Exclusive Agent Agreement, second reading.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just to clarify on the pedestrian safety and crosswalk awareness program and live council specifying amount, I assume you want to go the full amount as detailed in Ms. Simpson's memorandum?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. Any other? Hearing and seeing none, would you please call the roll?
Coos?
Yes.
Gage?
Yes.
Zingy?
Yes.
Flora?
Yes.
Chapel?
Yes.
Bergeron?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Brings us on then to new business, 7A1, and it's Vigor Alaska presentation regarding Ketchikan Shipyard. Carl, invite him up.
Going to defer to the representatives
All
of the
right.
shipyard.
Let's see if we can move some of this stuff out of their way.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Adam Beck. I'm Executive Vice President for Vigor. I have responsibility for all of our ship repair operations, including overall responsibility for the Ketchikan Shipyard. I also want to introduce Bergen Wheeler. Bergen is our relatively new general manager here at the Ketchikan Shipyard. And give him a moment to introduce himself to you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to see all your faces. Like Adam said, I'm the newly promoted general manager of the Ketchikan Shipyard. I was born here, raised here, worked at the shipyard 10 years, so I can definitely advocate for Ketchikan and my current place of employment and Vigor, and inform any of you and all of you after or around town on any type of questions too.
I also wanted to introduce Jill Mackey, who's here. She's our Vice President of Government Relations, and she's also here as a resource for anything and questions that folks may have. So appreciate getting some time on the agenda. I know you guys have a full packet tonight, so we'll go as quickly as we can here. Really appreciate both the city and the borough have always been big supporters of the shipyard and partner. We know there's been a lot of concern of recent, fair amount of rumor, particularly over the last year regarding employment levels and of our Vigor's overall commitment to the shipyard. On the last point, I want to be really clear. Vigor's honored to have the Ketchikan Shipyard as part of our company, and we have absolutely no plans to exit the shipyard at this time. As far as dealing with rumors and things, we need to do a better job of sharing information with you all, and we'll try to do this on a more regular basis so we can address any concerns that folks have and make sure that accurate information is getting out to the community. As far as status of the shipyard, last year was a bit challenging, particularly given the completion of the Alaska Class Ferry program and just overall between the ferry program winding down and then some of the challenges that are pretty well documented with the current status of the Marine Highway System made things a bit challenging. But to put things in perspective, if you look at historical averages before we started the Alaska Class Ferry, from 2003 through 2014, our average employment was 113 people. We're going to talk about a little bit where we're at. But in particular, our historic trends have always been that our seasonality is kind of inverse to the rest of the community, where we're very busy in the fall, winter, and the spring. In the summers when we're very slow, right? I mean, all of our customers are out earning their revenue and working mostly during the summer. The last place they want to be is in the shipyard. So we've typically seen pretty low numbers in the summer. The good thing is we very seldom have to actually lay off high numbers of people. A lot of our employees actually look forward to having their summers off. They either run charter fishing boats, or they like to go work on the road construction crews or other activities, or some of them just flat out like to take the summer off and paint their house or go fishing or do whatever they do. So it works out pretty good for most people. During the Alaska Class Ferry program, it was great that we were able to reach much higher employment. We actually peaked at about 271 people. The reality is without some kind of a major program like that, those kind of numbers are likely not going to be sustainable, right? And we'll be closer to the historical averages, and we're trying to be in that 100 to 150 range. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not out looking for the next Alaska Class type ferry program. or other fabrication opportunities in order to bring those numbers back up to the high 200s. But we, I don't want to give people false hope. Today, where we sit, we don't currently see that, but we're continuing to look. The one thing about the jobs that we have, just to remind folks, these are really good paying jobs. Our average annual wage is about 60% higher than the community average. So these are pretty coveted jobs. At our slowest part in 2019, we did a lot of things we could to keep people working. One of the things that we try to do, particularly for the slow summer months, is we try to do as much of our maintenance in the slow months as we can. That not only makes sense from a business standpoint, but also allows us to keep people working. It's also a company where folks have the ability to travel. We're usually busy in some of our other locations and can offer people an opportunity to at least keep earning a paycheck. And whereas it's certainly not the most desirable thing to do, it's better than no paycheck at all. And we do have a number of employees that take us up on that and go work in some of our other locations for short periods of time. So we talk. Turn it over to Bergen. He's going to talk a little bit about where we're at today and some things that are going on in the shipyard.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Thank you again for your time. So like Adam was stating about employment, right now at the shipyard we're around 100 people, or 100 employees, which is basically the historic medium that we have had here, at least in the last 10 years, and pre-ACF, that we've had at the shipyard. Also along with that is we're currently posting for 10 or 15 employee positions at the shipyard. I'll be at the job fair next month, trying to hire local here in Ketchikan or local Alaskan, and beyond that, try to beef up our numbers, to meet the demand that we have at the shipyard. So, as you can see for that draw, at least, there's no downturn, no rumors I hear from people saying there's 20 people working at the shipyard. I can attest very adamantly to that being to the contrary. Just want to, reiterate that Vigor is invested in Ketchikan for the long haul. There's, from everything that I've seen, and I'm a product of this, that there's definitely a core investment and core dedication to Ketchikan. Among all the other, workings that Vigor has, Ketchikan is a very key point to that. So, I want to touch on investments and training that we're doing at the shipyard. So in 2019, the data that I have on that, and the training programs that we applied there, and then also I'll go over what we have planned for in 2020 a little bit. A skilled workforce is essential to any type of industrial community, any type of actual community, to be able to fit any role that's required or needed, or that can be any entrepreneurial role that can be found or gone after. Training such as at the shipyard we have training, an annual training allocation that we try to get all of our base employees, new hires, senior employees, everyone that we can to get trained up further. Cross-crafting is another thing we call allowed myself as a machinist to go work for the paint crew during a summer, or go weld during the winter when there wasn't a lot of machining. So Vigor's really big on allowing the entire work base to build themselves up and give as much training as possible. Training programs such as CPR, arc flash awareness, asbestos and lead training and remediation, heavy rigging, ship fitting, welding, pipe fitting, TIG welding. There's a plethora of training opportunities that we give to employees, new hires, and everyone at the shipyard. Another thing we're working on, so that was 2019 and 2020. Primarily in 2020, another thing we're working on is the ASIC training and accreditation. So shipyards primarily, at least this shipyard primarily, the workforce is certified up to a certain standard that is USCG, the Coast Guard, and ABS, which is American Bureau of Shipping. ASIC is the American Institute of Steel certification. Allows us to branch out and diversify the non-maritime industry to hopefully gain more work for the Ketchikan shipyard, for the people of Ketchikan, grow the economy in Ketchikan and at the shipyard. Getting that certification is a long process. It's a long process for the certifications that we have right now, but we are in the midst of grinding through that entire process. So it'll give not piece to add to the whole. And with higher levels of certification and skills, we are able to better compete in the marketplace to get more jobs for the employment of Ketchikan and the betterment of our fine city and borough. Another thing I'd like to talk about is the investments that Vigor has put at the shipyard for infrastructure, just to double down on the not vacating type of stuff. In 2019, we purchased a state-of-the-art heating system for the pipe shop. We were also applied and awarded a MARAD grant, which is a cost-sharing grant for small shipyards. And Vigor, basically, you pay up everything, and they put a recomp back on products that are viable to gain employment and shipyard or industrial opportunities. With that, we got a brand new milling machine. There's new blasting and painting equipment. There's other mission critical pieces that were procured for the shipyard just over the last year and trailing into this year that definitely has benefited the people of Ketchikan, because it's a lot easier to say, hey, come here and work at the shipyard, let's train you on this equipment. We have the equipment here in Ketchikan, as opposed to outsourcing it to another place. And it also helps the other viable businesses in Ketchikan by allowing them to work in our community as opposed to outwards into other larger cities and other places. Nothing against all those places either. Last thing I want to touch on is just contributions of the community in regard to spending. So 2019, in raw dollar facts, approximately $5.5 million was spent of our annual spending, which is about 25% in the community of Ketchikan for businesses in Ketchikan. So try to buy local, spend local, invest as much, economically, viable mediums as can be possible into the community of Ketchikan. It's always something that's in the forefront of my mind, and I know Vigor's mind, and everyone else at the shipyard too. It benefits all of us as a whole. That's all I have for that, and I'll hand it back over to Adam. Thank you.
So just a couple closing thoughts here. So I recognize, particularly in the last year or so, we've not done a great job with our outreach and telling our story, and for that I want to apologize. And know you have my commitment that we'll do better. We'll try to get here at least on a couple times a year, and do things in between to make sure that folks know exactly what's going on. So for now, I do want to restate. Vigor's honored to have the Ketchikan Shipyard as part of our company. The people who work for us here, they're just outstanding people. They deserve everything that we can give them. We believe the shipyard can be successful, and again, we have no plans to exit. We hope the community, the city, and the borough will continue to support us here, and we have every intention of continuing to be a good partner in the community. With that, if there's any questions, be happy to.
Yeah, two questions. The first one's the easy one. What are you building in the corner out there next to the highway?
What are we building?
What are you doing?
So that's a medium. So the shipyard itself has I won't say antiquated, but the original electrical substation and subconduit service.
Okay.
So basically, it's a medium voltage power upgrade. So that's our laydown area, as we call it, where the steel comes in, and extra storage for build pieces, modules of the ACFs. So that's where our basic KPU drop pull is into the yard right there. So that's going to be a small satellite silo station, transformer station area.
Okay.
And then it'll be new cable ran to the pier, to a couple of the shops. I won't go into all the details, but it's electrical upgrade.
Okay. Now, the other questions in your crystal ball, does anybody know what the state's going to do with those new ferries to put side doors in?
Well, I assume they're going to operate them.
We're at.
Yeah. That's probably about all I have to say about that. So, no, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, here's the reality is, we're a shipyard, right? So we're focused on fixing ships and building ships. We're not ferry operators or vessel operators. So as far as what the ships need, what size they should be, how many side doors they should have, whether they have crew staterooms or not, that's not for us to decide, right? So we build what our customers ask us to build, and we fix what our customers ask us to fix. It's a great question, but you have to ask somebody else.
Crystal ball didn't work, did it?
Yeah. So.
Yes. Emily.
First, congratulations on your promotion. Well deserved. And then, do you guys have preferential hiring? So if people get laid off, do they get first dibs at those jobs when they come back, when the season picks up again or whatever? Do you give preference to people who have been employed there before?
Yeah, so I'll try to put my HR hat on and give the appropriate answer. The short answer is we almost always try to hire all our folks back that we can. There are times when people are not the level of employee that we would expect, and sometimes they're not called back. but usually they're not dealt with a layoff, right? But we always try to call our folks back if they have the skill set that we can. Not only from it's the right thing to do, it also makes financial sense, right? I mean, we always try to hire local. There is no benefit to us to bringing people in on airplanes and putting them in hotels and things. It is very, very expensive, and we will always hire local if they have the skill and ability that we need.
Excellent.
Good question.
So Adam, how is Vigor doing competitively wise in Alaska and against Washington too? I know it's a little bit difficult to do something against Washington, but I know there's workaround, and I just don't know what your strategies are in regards to the market.
Yeah, so the market's in a really interesting situation right now. So in Oregon and Washington, our shipyards are busier than they've ever been, particularly with large Navy type work. And so the good thing about that is that also helps to displace other work. So we're doing everything we can to push that work to Ketchikan as it's not available. We saw some of that. I don't know if any of you saw earlier this summer. There was an Army Corps of Engineers dredge that came up for a dry docking. It wasn't a big job, but that's okay. We'll take whatever we can get. That job came up here because our other yards were full, and we were able to divert that work up here. We've done that with some other work. And we're also going out and bidding on things that wouldn't in the past have been traditional work for the Ketchikan shipyard. We actually have 2 pending bids right now on some smaller Navy support craft that we're hoping to see up here this summer. We're continuing to look for other sources of revenue. We're actually starting the process right now to get the Ketchikan shipyard qualified to bid some other military Sea Lift Command work, and then we've got some potential Army work coming up that we'll also be bidding. So we're looking at everything that we can. As far as from a competitive standpoint, this industry is no different than many. It's very much a supply and demand type industry. So one day you're in a great situation and you can win a lot of work, and then other days things change and crazy things happen. I mean, there was just a job recently that the 2 shipyards in Alaska were within about 10% of each other on a bid, and a shipyard in Canada was less than half of both of our bids. And sometimes that happens. There isn't anything you can do about it. But overall, I mean, I think we're in a pretty good place. We're looking for how we continue to fill and really get to kind of a stable platform and diversify so that we're not as reliant on just the Marine Highway System.
So we haven't had a conversation yet, but I know that there was conversations in regards to small cruise ships or other larger ships in Alaska and the ability to port them in Ketchikan at our facilities in order to, because they don't want to come here, get the work done, or have to run it up here and then run it back someplace else, to where they're looking for some winter layup. At the same time, they're doing the maintenance. And then I guess the other possibility was doing some dockside work rather than lift work in regards to some of the stuff that's going on. So we haven't had those conversations with you, but I wondered if you can expound if you're looking at anything like that.
Yeah, no, it's a great topic that you bring up. So yeah, we're working on with some of the, I'll call them the boutique type cruise operators. And we won some work from a customer here a year ago. We're bidding several other jobs for them that'll be coming up this winter that we're hoping to be successful. We're also supported in that effort by the what they call the AK ship financing program that ADA worked hard to get in place, where they can provide some short-term financing for some of these entities. One of the cruise ship operators is the first customer that's taken advantage of that. But you're right. One of the challenges we have is that as a region, we don't have much in the way of layup space for these vessels. I mean, we have plenty of space, but we don't have the infrastructure that's really needed to support these vessels. So they need to be able to tie up. They need shore power, they need fire protection, water, those types of things, or else they have to keep a generator running and keep crew on all winter, and it's just not practical for them to be able to do that. And they can go to places like Puget Sound and others and get those types of services that they need. So it's a bit of a challenge for us. So, and at the shipyard, unfortunately, we just don't have enough physical space. I mean, you put two Alaska Marine ferries at our pier, and the pier's full, and so it's something that we'll continue to work with the community and see what we can do there.
Well, and again, we have docks that are sitting empty during the winter that if we could figure out what the infrastructure is that is needed, then we're going to work with you guys in regards to capturing some of that work so we have employment here and are competitive with other areas. I think that would be a benefit.
Yeah, well, it would, and we're happy to work with you. I know we've had a few conversations with some folks, and we can help with what those requirements are and figure out how to do it. And you're right, it's not only a benefit, really, to get that kind of work here, we would have to have it. I mean, they're just not going to come and have to leave a crew on board and run a generator 24/7 all winter long. It's just not feasible for them to do that. So, so I appreciate bringing that up.
Yes, Stanley.
Last year there was a rumor that you guys might have a contract with the Coast Guard instead of them going all the way to Hawaii. Was that something that was worked on, or was it just a rumor?
So I don't know about one going to Hawaii. There are typically Coast Guard jobs that we bid on. One of the big challenges that we have with Coast Guard is they predominantly do most of their work as what's called small business set-aside. And unfortunately, Ketchikan Shipyard being part of Vigor, the way that calculation is done is we don't qualify to be able to bid on that. This is something that we've been working on, and particularly Jill, to her credit, has been very tenacious on this. There is language in the current Coast Guard Authorization Act that we think will significantly improve that and give us an opportunity to bid more Coast Guard work. So Senator Sullivan has been a great supporter in this, as has Senator Murkowski and others. So we're hopeful that legislation will pass and we'll have a better opportunity to compete for that work. And that's really all we're looking for, is just to not be excluded, right? It's just an opportunity to compete for that work. So we'll keep chasing that until we make it happen.
Anybody else? So Adam, I don't think anybody's looking to run Vigor out of town. I think you guys brought a work culture here that was an example for a long period of time. We're just hoping that the shipyard stays busy so that the subsidies that we provide to the city and the borough are realized and help in regards to improve employment, housing, and all that other kind of stuff in the community. So.
I appreciate that.
Anybody else?
We want to be here for the long haul, too.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
The next item is 7A2, Ketchikan Visitors Bureau presentation of the Ketchikan Tourism Best Management Practice Program. Good evening.
Hello.
You're going to run the projector, I take it.
I am. I might with Taylor's help since she's here. Can we move this over? Because I just realized I probably should be at the mic when I'm talking. And then, you guys usually turn off the back lights or the front lights? Maybe. Okay. That works too. Yeah, thank you. So Taylor's passing out basically a paper copy of the presentation so that you'll have that for your reference after we get done.
Thank you.
For the record, Patty Mackey, I'm the president of the Ketchikan Visitors Bureau, and I will be brief. I didn't put a lot of slides together because I know you guys are busy, but I'm excited to share with you kind of the progress that we've made over the past year with developing and soon implementing the Best Management Practices program. So we have some priorities for the program, and as you can see, I won't read it off to you, but what we're really looking to do is create a program that our visitor industry businesses can buy into, that helps them define better practices and a better experience for their visitors. And it also gives our community a way to, or a means to communicate with the industry when they have concerns or questions. They see something and they don't quite understand why it's being done the way it's being done. So the key components are, this is a voluntary compliance program. This is not statutes, ordinances, code. That's your job. All we're trying to do is create guidelines and encourage our stakeholders and the community to provide input to the program, what's working, what doesn't work. As I mentioned earlier, we have a means for residents to communicate with us, and it's a living document. So even the draft that you were provided in your packets a week ago, that has already changed. So we're still working on tweaking it. We're still getting input from our members, and we anticipate, hopefully, input from you as well, and from the community. So we borrowed heavily from Juneau's Tourism Best Management Practices program, which has actually been in place for 23 years now, I think. Their program was industry-led, was the representatives of the tour bus companies and helicopter companies. Those of you who've been around a while know that there was a lot of issue in Juneau with regard to helicopter noise, because everybody wants to get on a helicopter and fly to a mountain and ride in a dog sled, and that was starting to become a problem. So they developed this program. And this is just a quick look at their mission statement, some of the key participants or partners that they have in their program as well. And then here you can see examples of either, like, here's a story that ran in Capital City Weekly. And then these are basically advertisements that they run in the newspaper every year, just reminding people that you have an opportunity to let us know when you have a concern using our hotline. And then they also run ads regularly listing all of the participants. So this is a year-over-year comparison by call type, and I realize it's hard to read, so you get a better view of this on the back page of your packet. But since the program was implemented, just to give you an idea, in 2000, they recorded 248 calls to their hotline, and in years since, they've also added email as an option for people to make comments. And the concerns varied from cruise ship noise to emissions issues, flight seeing, vehicle issues, and then miscellaneous. So move over to 2018, and those total calls have dropped from 248 down to 54. And Juneau believes that the real reason for that is because they finally gave the community an avenue that they could utilize to share concerns and get questions answered. Sometimes it's just a simple lack of communication that is the culprit. So we believe that by implementing this program that we will also see similar results, probably a little heavy the first year as people get used to the program, but then I think it'll go down after that. So to give you an idea of our timeline, we started out in January of last year at our annual board retreat discussing the fact that we felt like the time had come. You know, there's concerns in the community about the growth of the industry, and we wanted to have a program that was proactive. In April, we had a chance to meet with representatives of the city, borough. You can see up there, Clea, Alaska was in town, our board, and then the chamber. And there was definitely encouragement from all sides to start working on this program. So we moved forward. Our board established a steering committee. And then, if you can believe it, through the summer months, when my board members are their busiest, they worked on developing a plan for Ketchikan. And they basically just took the Juneau as kind of a boilerplate and then started selecting reviewers from different industry sectors so that we had people, you know, aviators looking at the aviation plan and marine operators looking at that. And they started crafting our own plan for Ketchikan. I think I mentioned this during budget hearings, so we'd gotten a grant back in November from the borough utilizing CPV funds to help us with our startup and promotional expenses. What the plan is, or what the grant is covering, is building a website. It's also going to help us with the printing of this year's handbooks once we get ready to distribute those. It will also help us with the advertising campaign. And all of the companies who participate, companies and organizations, will be provided decals that they can either put in their storefronts, in their vehicles. Juneau does the same thing, that identifies them. And we'll have rack cards that will be available in the visitor centers and other locations around town where we have brochure displays where people can get information like, well, what does TBMP mean? And they'll see the rack card and they'll be able to take a look at it. So last month at our board's regular meeting, they approved the draft guidelines, and now we're in the process of basically rolling out the program to City Council. We'll be seeing the Borough Assembly next month, and we're putting together an event for community members to come. And then April, throughout the summer, our partners who decide to participate will sign on, and then they'll be training their employees. I think this is kind of a duplicate slide, but again, just a representation of the people that, or the entities that we've been working with this past year. Several departments within the city and the borough, other organizations, and of course state and federal agencies like the Forest Service and state parks, where commercial tour operations take place on a regular basis. So 2 elements of the program, the website, which has not launched yet, we're completing it, and I'll show you just a few images of it real quick in a moment. But we do have a website, and then we have a hotline phone number that will be available during the season. We hope to launch it before the first ship is here. April 25th, I believe, is when the first large ship comes. This is an opportunity for people to contact the TBMP. Our staff, our visitor information staff at the KVB, will monitor the hotline phone as well as the email address, and will be responsible for letting whoever the comment, concern, complaint, or I hope compliment about is forwarded to them. And then our partners they agree to respond within 3 days to explain their actions or try and provide the information that the person that's inquiring is asking about. This is just a real quick look at the TBMP website. It's very basic. The intent is that we'll be able to upload the content and manage the content ourselves. We won't need a webmaster to do that for us. So we have a home page, and you can see this is the resource page, and this is just an example of the documents that we will have available. We will be posting relevant Ketchikan Municipal Code, boroughs, zoning requirements. We've got the marine mammal, watchable wildlife regulations and guidelines, Forest Service management plan documents, all of those things on the website for easy access. The intent was to keep the handbook pretty small and nimble so that we can update it as needed, and then have the bulk of the regulatory information or the guidelines that our program is emphasizing or encouraging our partners to utilize is available online. And then finally, and this is not a very good shot of this page, but this is the comment form that we created online so people can fill in the blanks and then provide us with an explanation or what their questions are going to be. The components, as I've already kind of touched on, if you agree to partner and become a TBMP program partner, then you are agreeing to implement the best practices that relate to your type of business in your everyday operations, and through training your staff to do so as well. As I mentioned, they also agree to address any issues or concerns that are raised not only by the community, but also our other stakeholders, city and borough, or other governmental agencies, and other partners. We encourage, and this works really well in Juneau, so we'll see how it goes here, but if somebody else who's participating in the program sees something that they think, you guys probably didn't really want to be doing that, they are voluntarily providing that information to their other partners to share that so that they can address it. I didn't want to get into the weeds too much, but here's just some general agreements that are part of the program. A lot of this comes honestly just right out of the code of ethics that we use at the Visitors Bureau, and it's just good common sense. We want our partners and other, we want all businesses in Ketchikan who are hosting visitors to present their information accurately, to realize that we all play a role in hosting visitors and making sure that even if they don't want to buy my kayak tour, I'm going to help them find what it is they want to do while they're here and help to create a really good experience for them so that they go back and become our ambassadors and spread good word of mouth about Ketchikan. As I mentioned earlier, in addition to training staff to be aware of these policies and procedures, there will be work sessions where we will update partners on anything that's changed in the program. Of course, there's a lot of self-monitoring involved, but we anticipate, by and large, we have a lot of companies that already have excellent customer service training programs in place. So for them, this is already pretty much what they're doing. For others, it's a tool to help them kind of raise the bar on their own practices. And then some of the other things that we wanted to call out, of course, litter recycling, as Abby mentioned, it's not really very easy to do now, but we can certainly clean up our areas, make sure that we avoid cultural appropriation and that we show respect for Alaska Native and other local cultures, and that we're accurate, we adhere to federal, state, and local laws, and that we practice good wildlife viewing protocols.
Hey, Patty, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Let's see, who was the lady that came up and talked, that went on the 6-week tour to...
Abby, yeah.
I was sorry I didn't get to go with them that one. She talked about something that I've heard a lot about, and that's folks that were having these tours that you overhear some of the things that these folks are saying, and it's absolute malarkey. I mean, it's just, there's no basis in fact or reality. And so as somebody who was born and raised here, I'm kind of like embarrassed and humiliated that people would travel from far places in the world to be basically lied to and told things that are untrue. Mm-hmm. So if there's something that we could do that would kind of rein that in, I
as a matter of fact, Councilmember Bergeron, there is something the City Council can do.
And what is that?
And that is that you can adopt this as something that you recommend, and that you also consider that folks who are taking advantage of the port tour centers on the dock, and that are also, that getting permits from you for their vehicles to be on the dock, that they be members of this program. And
so who's gonna be the police? Who's gonna?
Well, that's the challenge. I mean, with a program like this, and Kirby Day and Juneau's the one that really has worked on this program for years. Is kind of the father of TPMV, if you will. And he said, that it's not really a problem. There's accountability among operators. Now, I agree with you that we see it too. We hear some ridiculous stuff. It's also why, it's kind of frustrating in the climate we're in. We've had some really great programs, like tour guide training programs that were administered by the state of Alaska through the Department of Commerce. But over the last 15, 20 years, those programs aren't being funded, and there hasn't been something to kind of pick up the slack. We continue with our Alaska Host training programs, which is all about customer service and accuracy and all of that. But
when do you host those?
We're not an enforcement agency, unfortunately, but we could at least try and get everybody to play on the same.
Well, you can let them know on their little ghost tour that I'm very much alive.
Isn't you were dead?
Yeah, I'm one of the ghosts that hang out by the tunnel. So
you know what I mean?
I'm going to show up one day and go boo.
I will tell you, if I hear something, I go to people and I just flat out call them out on it. And I say, there was an operator that was doing a tour in town, and I heard some really outlandish things, and I called them on it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we're happy to call people in on that if you want to call me and tell me that you have a concern. And now you have a vehicle to do this too, because nothing says that Councilmember Gage can't get on and say, I am not dead.
I just figured I'd swoop in on my little,
So anyway, these are the subsections for the different agreements. So when we put the handbook together, we put a whole bunch of it up front because they're all common sense things that we think every business should participate in. And then we have specific subsections for these different sectors of the industry. And these were all reviewed by people who work in the industry. And in the case of the airport, we had the airport look at it. We had Mr. Corporon review Ports and Harbors with us. We've had really great support from the different agencies in town to make sure that we get the information correct. And it's still changing. I just got a call today from a local pilot who said, I saw that you were going to the council, and he says, I read your plan and this doesn't work for us. So we will work with them to fix those kinds of things.
So just like when people, so they'll sign this and they're supposed to just manage themselves in that way. What is the, I know that it's not an ordinance, but where is the teeth in it if, when somebody is being disrespectful to other tour guides?
Well,
I know that was an issue last summer.
That's where the complaints come. And that's where let me tell you a little bit about how Juneau handles the complaints. They actually log them. They make them available for anybody to view. And if there was resolution, then they also provide that information as well. So I think in a way, and from what Kirby told me in the Juneau program, it really kind of boils down to, the last thing you want is to be a TPMB member and then be called out because you're not following the rules, because that just doesn't look good to your counterparts or anybody else. But, we don't plan to do any public shaming per se. But I think just the accountability that we're sending you an email that says this was what somebody saw or heard, and we want you to explain it. Mm-hmm. And if it's an error, then they're going to say, okay, that's not going to happen again, and we will tell our staff that we don't want to do it. So,
Patty?
Yeah, Judy.
Given that you're saying this is a living document and it's changing all the time, have you guys given any consideration to having it on an app?
On the document information, possibly. We tried to build a cruise ship schedule app last year, and believe it or not, Apple turned us down because we weren't serving a large enough population. So, but there are ways to get around that. You could certainly make it mobile-friendly website pages, which we would do because all of our web pages are mobile-friendly, so people can access that while they're out and about.
Just when I think of printing this out and the cost involved in doing that, if there's changes all the time, I just wonder.
Well, what I should say, we're in the draft period right now. We're going to launch the program, and then on an annual basis, unless something is so obviously wrong that it needs to be changed right away, then we will update the plan more on an annual or twice a year basis as opposed. But if we find new rules, we'll put them in. And I think your idea is great, but it's nice to have something to hand your employees to review and sign and sit down. We don't plan to print everything. That's why all of it will be on the website, so that it will be something that they'll have access to.
Okay, thank
you. You kind of touched on this a little bit, that you guys are going to be self-monitoring and that you're going to be logging these things. I just wanted to get a better or a more clear idea of what kind of data you will be collecting. Will you be able to provide summaries at the end of the year of how many calls, were they resolved within this, what type of self-monitoring data, what are you guys collecting? What will you have?
We haven't done it yet, so I'm only speculating here, but the intention is that there would probably be something like a spreadsheet with all of the calls logged and the dates, and also the actions taken, if the issue, how the issue was addressed, who was involved in it, and how it was resolved. So, and that information is certainly something that would then be available to our stakeholders. For example, if the city was interested, how many violations or how many people did we have issues with in the port program? We can provide that to you.
Well, that was kind of some of my thinking. If you see repeat people again and again and again and again, mentioned some things earlier and what the city can do, and so just thinking about
Right.
that.
Well, and if it's a port issue, then we're likely going to copy Mr. Corporon.
Yeah.
He's going to see it when we do. So we have a very good working relationship with Ports and Harbors since we lease from you and all that.
So is this a membership? People have to sign up for this, and there's a cost associated with being part of this? Or is this just everyone who is serving the tourism industry?
This is open to anyone and everyone. There is a simple partner agreement form that they would fill out and say that they wanted to be a part of the program. And then we have the only other form we actually have is one for their employees that would sign off after that partner has completed the training that we expect them to do if they're going to be part of it. There is no fee. It's not limited just to KVB members. It's intended to be a community-wide program.
How long is the training?
It's just as long as it takes to walk through the various elements and provide them with, here's how you get to the website and here's how you can access these materials. So it'll be pretty simple. It needs to be pretty simple and concise, otherwise you'll lose interest. If it starts becoming something that employers are having to spend, half a day on, they're not going to take the time to implement it. So.
Yeah, Patty, earlier when we started doing this, there was, I think, a comment around the table, and I know myself in particular, that if we get this going, that the city might consider making this a requirement for the permits that we issue for tours. And I don't know whether the council is still willing to do that. I would be, and it means that we're going to, I know the clerk issues a number of just tours for small operators and maybe some for the biggers too, but there's probably 100 plus. And as far as I'm concerned, they should be willing to follow this, or they don't get a permit to do a tour in town. Now, I don't know whether we're going to agree to that further, but the key is if we do, I don't know at what point in time the clerk and people start issuing these permits, but we need to have this to the point that here's what you're going to be living with, which in the tour season starts end of April, and their permits are going to start going to be looking for them probably the 1st of April.
Wasn't the borough also working on something too?
So you mean to make it a requirement?
To some kind of, because of some of the issues they've had.
The borough planning department is actually working on a community tourism plan, which is a completely separate animal than what this is. But yes, and Richard Harney was a big part of sitting in on these meetings, and he had already been looking into the Juno program when we actually sat down and talked about doing one in Ketchikan. So. And we'll be presenting to the assembly next week.
Because they kind of had something for Herring Cove, and I know that that was a conversation.
And we did include, even though, if you will recall, the borough kind of had to step back from Herring Cove because they didn't have the ability to actually enforce it. But we put those guidelines in the TDMP.
Yeah,
so that if nothing else, they're there, and those folks that are going to participate in our program are basically saying that they're going to abide by those guidelines.
Any more questions?
Yes, I have one.
Yes.
So I guess I need to understand, how are we going to monitor this again? We're not expecting the police department to go out and serve tickets, are we?
No.
None of that stuff.
As I mentioned earlier, it's voluntary compliance.
Okay.
Because we're not a regulatory agency, and nor do we want to be. But what we can do is set this out and say this is the standard that we expect those of you who really want to excel at what you're doing to follow. And we hope that we'll get them to want to do that because of that.
Okay, that's great.
Be a good neighbor and everything.
Right.
Thank you, Patty.
Yeah, and we will, like I said, we're presenting to you. We're going to do a community presentation, and this program will be ready to go for this season.
Good.
All right, thank you all very much.
Hey, you didn't plug your upcoming event.
Oh my! I don't know. We're almost sold out.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, so if you really want to have a good time, Mayor Bob's already on there. The Visitors Bureau's annual banquet is coming up Friday, February 28th. We do themed banquets because we try to be a little different from other events. And so our theme this year is the Roaring 20s on the Creek. And so you're invited to dress up in flapper and fish pirate, bootlegger type gear and come join us. We'll be at Sunny Point. Begins at 6:30 p.m. Tickets are available. Just give us a call or shoot me an email and we'll get you squared away. And we also present our awards. We do annual awards program for businesses and organizations in the community that have really stepped up in terms of being a part of the industry. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bob. Appreciate it.
All right, that brings us down to item 7A3, discussion of starting times of City Council meeting. Councilmember Bergeron.
Thank you. I think this came up when we were in one of our 9:30 going on 10 o'clock meetings. For me, I would prefer that we started the meetings earlier so we could get home earlier. If you look at tonight's agenda, we have no less than 3 executive sessions along with a rather lengthy agenda. For me, I'd rather get home before 10:30 or 11 and have a better chance of getting a decent night's sleep. So if there's any interest among the council to start at 6 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock, I would support that.
Anybody else? How you feel about it? Judy.
Personally, it would be difficult for me to consistently be here at 6. I do a lot of home visits after work. I have to go grab something to eat, so it wouldn't always be possible.
Thank you. Mark.
Yeah, me too. 5:30 is as early as I get out of work. A lot of times later than that, so it's not really viable for me, unfortunately.
Thank you.
What about like a happy medium? What about like 6:30?
So I would be open to anything earlier than 7. So 6:30 is great.
Yeah, I also, it affects our staff and crews too, because they get off work, they got to get dinner, running home, doing all their stuff and getting back. So I don't know how well that works to do it at an earlier hour. So
okay,
just a thought, and but I'm open to any suggestions. Think about it and shoot me an email. Let me know.
Okay. Thanks for bringing it up.
Item 4, 2020 Community Humanitarian Service Grant Funding Agreements. So that's there is a motion. There's 2 motions, actually.
Your Honor.
Yes.
I move the City Council direct the City Manager to enter into the 2020 funding agreements with those organizations for those dollar amounts as recommended by the Community Grant Committee in the amount of $309,000 and authorize funding from the City Council's 2020 Community Grant Program contract purchase services account number 610.02.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Comments? I appreciate everybody's work on it. I know it's a difficult thing to sit down and try to figure this out, and there's a lot of needs out there and a limited amount of money. Dick, what do you have?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Item number, well, I'm looking at, I guess it's page 125, but it's how the money's distributed. What is Grow Catch a Can? And what are they going to do for us? So somebody sitting on the committee, because I don't have a clue what was turned in. It's a new one for the list.
So I sit on the committee. They provide economic development, and they were going to begin doing energy studies. They had said that they had already worked with several businesses in town, helping them with their business models and plan and economic development, and like I said, energy audits. So they were participating in those services, was my understanding from the grant application.
Energy audits for who?
whoever would want them, whoever would want to
Is that part of
participate.
our grant program? That's my question. It's not much money, although they did want 25 grand, but you only awarded them $3,400. I'm just asking the question. It's not something that was on my radar to be putting out grant money for, even though it's a small amount. It's a small amount. So
There were several letters of support that came with that application in terms of people who thought that the services they had received were effective. That was why I recommended providing, as sitting on the grant committee, providing some funds to them. You can see that we didn't fund them in the full amount. Do you have any other thoughts, Judy?
No, I think the funding we provided them was minimal to see, what they can do. They did get support in the community. So I figure they asked for $25,000. We offered $3,400, so it's considerably less. And we'll see what they can do with that.
I can get support in the community for anything I want to propose.
Then bring it to the grants committee and let's see if we can fund it.
We've got to be reasonable about what we're doing, and we're not. Next question. The two that we're funding out of the marijuana tax, it looks like they went up considerably. And you guys, the committee did a good job. I'm not arguing about that. That's not a tough one to be, but I'm still looking at the money we're spending and where it's going. And those are both good outfits to support, but one went up by 30% and the other went up by probably 20%. And I guess I'm just questioning that, and also without knowing what's left in the marijuana tax pot, is there enough there to do it? It'd be a question for Bob probably.
So I can speak to that a little bit. So the Path Shelter had some maintenance issues. They had some infrastructure problems that had come up that couldn't be deferred. And so that was the reason for their increase. And for City Homeless Services, they filled a gap in services. They were closing one component at a certain time, and there was a 2-hour gap that was creating issues. So they were receiving complaints from bus drivers, from the police department, etc. So what they did this year was they filled that gap in service and provide continual service, and that is reflected in the budget. That's how much it cost them to do that. They received a lot of positive feedback from both the police, bus shelter, people in the state building saying that really helped, because there weren't people just milling around in those areas in that gap period. So they pretty much can provide a continuity of care, and that's the reason for the budget increase. And luckily they're here today if I got it wrong and any if that was inaccurate.
We just need to be careful. Next year it'll go up another 25%. It's free money.
I'm going to say I think this is a great use for their marijuana tax, personally.
I'm not arguing that.
Gentlemen.
To speak to what Kusa's talking about, I think this maybe starts the conversation about what are we going to do in the future, depending on, because of the need, and for both the day shelter and the night shelter, but also considering maybe looking at a Housing First project, so that we're not just putting a Band-Aid on it every year. I know that both agencies are kind of working on something. I don't know where they're at on it, but as I'm willing to be, I think as a city council, it'd be good to look into that too and be a partner in that, if that's something any of them are looking at doing, especially with that marijuana tax, if we're getting to that point.
Judy.
So I don't think we ever said that all the marijuana tax is going to go to the homeless. And I do think we need to start taking a more serious approach to how we deal with this. And maybe some type of I suggested this before, some kind of a task force getting these groups together. One of the reasons that a couple of years ago I wanted this funded separately was so that we could take a more serious look at what we're doing with the homeless here. And maybe this is the time to start doing that. So maybe we should volunteer to meet with them and see what we can come up with. And I don't know, there might be grants. You're good at grants. But I don't think it's something that the city can, continue to throw money at either. I mean, we're doing what we can now, but at some point, we have to look past that. And maybe this is the time to start at least exploring that.
So, Emily, did I understand you correctly when you said the item 9 path was to work on building infrastructure?
There were some infrastructure issues. There was some, I think, their heating system needed upgrading, and I don't have the application right in front of me, but it was relating to the structure of the building. They were questioned during the grant committee, well, why aren't we putting these funds into a new building? The cost was just too outstanding, and the need was immediate. Yes, that is where their sites are set, and also they have these immediate needs to keep people warm and dry and safe. There was some bathroom upgrades, I think, as well. Mark and Judy I don't know if you guys remember anything else from the applications.
That covers.
That would cover it, but I think it was more maintenance issues. So the windows that they have are failing. They needed to, do something about that. That's how they framed it. Because, originally I know that we don't fund capital projects. I know that we just fund operational. So when they presented it to us, these are things that they got a lot of deferred maintenance there. Let's face it, we've all been in that building. And so that's why we did what we did.
But I think it spoke to the essence of their operation. They weren't adding a new wing.
Right.
This was to maintain functionality.
Yeah, so I did this the first couple of years in regards to it, and we didn't have the marijuana tax in order to pay for some of this, but there was a broad concern about funding capital projects, and I actually think Wish had asked for some windows in their building, and of course they get larger funds from elsewhere too, but I think that we go down a path that is a little bit slippery when we start doing the maintenance on their buildings and stuff. If these programs can't survive with other, because I just think that if we provide them more and more funds, they're going to be less and less active in raising their own and maintaining their own. And so that has me of some concern, because when there wasn't a lot of money, they worked hard at fundraisers and other things. And so if you get more money and there's more money coming, then you probably don't work as hard at that. So it just, to me, it's capital projects are of concern with the use of this money, because it is for, and I understand that it improves the quality of life for these individuals, but we do humanitarian services through the city of Ketchikan, economic development, and that type of stuff is usually done through the borough. So just where I'm at with it.
I'm just curious if these folks would like to speak to that as far as alternative fundraising, because I'm not sure what their opinion would be. Would that be okay? Or?
Yeah, fine. They're here to speak.
Sorry to put you on the spot, guys.
Well, PATH isn't here. They're the ones who...
Yeah, so to clarify, PATH isn't,
Yeah, so to clarify, we're from First City Homeless Services, and I can't speak directly for PATH, although we have been in communication with them. About a year ago, we started meeting with them pretty regularly, trying to start coming together with some consolidated plans maybe in the future. That got put on hold because of the significant budget concerns we had with state funding last year. So we're just picking up again with that, with Gary Boatwright, Tyretke, etc. So I don't have any new information as far as that goes. I will say that both PATH and First City Homeless Services, we're exceptionally active with fundraising. This community is amazingly supportive, and we're fortunate to get a lot of support in the community, but there's also a limit to how much we can do with that. So for instance, we'll be having a big fundraiser, our annual event, Empty Bowls, in March 28th. If anybody wants, we'll be getting tickets out there right around the 1st of March, which is around the corner. But that event takes around 40 individuals to volunteer. It takes us about 6 weeks to put on. Takes us about 8 hours on the day of activities. And last year that netted us about $12,000. So if you can imagine the amount of energy that goes into that and how much that takes away from other programs that we need to provide. So that's why we rely pretty heavily on grants to be able to focus our energy on services to the community. And I can say for the First City Homeless Services, the $12,000 increase from for this year from last year's request, that almost covers the amount for the extended hours that we did. Our overnight warming center closed at 6 a.m. the last few years that we've done that, and our day shelter opens at 8 a.m. So for that 2 hours, we would have to make everybody leave, and then they'd come back. So some folks would jump on the bus and do some round trips to stay warm, or they would go down to the mall to hang out in Safeway. Some of them would go to the emergency room and have ailments looked at that maybe weren't really critical, but it would keep them warm. And some of them would hang out in the bus shelters downtown. Some of them would hang out in the parking garage across the street for the state building. So when we closed that gap of 2 hours in the morning, it cost us about $550 a week to do that, bringing on some new staff. But what we got immediately was the police department said their calls for those 2 hours in the morning went to zero. That the emergency room told us that it was pretty typical for them to see anywhere from 1 to 3 people coming in the morning seeking services from the homeless community. That went down to near zero, other than people who were actually experiencing medical concerns that were pretty significant. The bus transit department told us that their issues went to near zero. They had no complaints in that first month that we tried that on a trial basis in December. They had 0 complaints from other bus users in the community, and they had been having regular complaints. So we felt that $550 a week that we're spending for that extra 2 hours gap coverage has an immediate and direct financial benefit to not only the city but also borough and other entities in the town. So we feel like that's a really important thing to fund, and we are actually still in the process of applying for the state grant this year. And thankfully, they put out the solicitation for that CIMG grant, but they did not increase the amount like we were hoping. So we're still looking at a flat cap of what we can ask for the state. And we're looking at probably a pretty flat cap on what we can ask for from the borough. So that's why we did come to you guys directly and asking for that extra $12,000.
Thank you. I'd like to add, too, that we have individual donations on a regular basis. They're not great, they're not a lot, but they are continuing. We continually get individual donations. We also have grants from KIC, from the hospital, Peace Health. We do get monies from other places, plus our fundraisers.
Yeah, that was a great example. I think that's exactly what this money was intended to do, and it sounds like it was that particular one was very successful, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment. I just wanted to say thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
You know, I live in the neighborhood. I drive by these folks all the time, and I see a lot of the people that you serve are people that are having mental issues, and that there's no other place that we as a community are addressing these things, and I'm just grateful that they have you to go to. And I have a lot of compassion and empathy for these folks who are in positions that they are helpless, and it's not no fault of their own. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to add to that, we've experienced this past year more, it appears to be more mental health issues of a broader range of individuals, and that is very challenging.
I can see that just by going by there, and I observed that myself, and thank you.
Yeah, even 4 years ago, the majority of the participants that we had in there on a regular basis would be chronic inebriates or kind of more typical chronic homeless folks. or a mix of transient folks that were coming into town looking for work and maybe had difficulty finding work or certainly finding housing. And in the last probably 3 years, we've seen a pretty significant shift to where we're seeing a large number of folks with severe mental health illness diagnoses that are not able to access treatment or unwilling to seek treatment or follow through on treatment, and also an increase in the amount of more severe hard drug use and substance abuse. So recognizing that, and that isn't something that we historically had really been addressing or able to address with the services that we provide, we have been working pretty closely with Gateway and with KIC Behavioral Health, and we're trying to find a way, and of course everyone's pretty strapped for money to expand programs, but we are actively working with them and trying to find a way to get services connected with folks that are coming through our program, because oftentimes we're the only people that interact with them in the community on a regular basis, and we'd like to make those connections happen whenever we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have motion number 1. Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Flora?
Yes.
Zingy?
Yes.
Coos?
Okay.
Gage?
Yes.
Bergeron?
Aye.
Chapel?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the recommended motion number 2. I have a motion.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I move the City Council direct the City Manager to enter into 2020 funding agreements with First City Homeless Services and the Ketchikan Homeless Shelter PATH for those dollar amounts as determined appropriate by the City Council. If necessary, authorize a budget transfer in an amount determined appropriate by the City Council from appropriated reserves of the Marijuana Sales Tax Fund to the Mayor and Council's 2020 Humanitarian Services Grant Programs Grant Awards account number 610-.02, and authorize funding from the City Council's 2020 Humanitarian Services Grant Program Contract Purchase Services account number 610.02.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Judy?
Well, I think that, I agree to some extent about the capital projects, but this year, at this time, those funds are needed. To not do it, I think, it just doesn't make sense to me. They're going to end up paying more in operational costs for heating, fuel, and electricity. So if we can help alleviate that, I think that's something. And then maybe, talk to them about that, maybe make it a little clearer in our presentation for the community grants, what we want out of them.
So what we're talking about is the extra funds that brought it to the $71,000 and to the $75,000 in this motion? Or is it in regards to, I think there was something further down?
I think an additional $28,580 is what we need.
If the intent is to fully fund both, you're looking at $146,000 and a budget transfer of $28,580
Where is the 28,000 coming from, Mr. Mayor?
from the marijuana tax appropriated reserves.
I thought I was misreading this, and I thought all of it was coming from that.
The additional, this is above and beyond what you appropriated in the budget. It's all coming from the marijuana sales tax.
Out of the reserves instead of out of the appropriated amount.
Correct.
Thank you, that's where my confusion was. Appreciate that. So do you need a motion, Mr. Mayor?
We have a motion.
We have a motion on the floor right now.
For the full amount?
In order to, the motion now is to transfer the funds to fully fund the process that we talked about.
Good question. Let's do it.
Is there any other consideration?
Right.
Just one comment.
Yeah.
Like I brought up with the general city budget, to Mr. Coos's valid concern, well, next year they're going to come back for 20% more. Maybe earlier in the year, we can let these agencies know to expect whatever it is the expectation is, flat funding or less funding, or maybe only 3% more, so that these folks can plan as far in advance and explore those alternative sources of funding.
Anybody else? Yes, Emily.
Just got a comment that if we don't spend these funds now, it is going to cost the city more funds later for all of the reasons that we've seen. If we don't have safe housing for these people, they are going to end up in the ER. They are going to end up, having police interactions, and all of that costs us money. So I think this is a good upfront cost. I'm supportive of it.
Okay. Anybody else? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Bergeron?
Aye.
Coos?
Yes.
Gage?
Yes.
Zingy? Yes. Flora?
Yes.
Chapel?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 7A5, proposed topic of Peace Health Ketchikan Medical Center quarterly presentation to the City Council at its meeting on March 19, 2020. So there is a motion. On page, I think, 130.
Your Honor, I move the City Council direct the City Manager to advise Peace Health Ketchikan Medical Center of the City Council's acceptance and/or modification of the proposed topics of discussion for the quarterly update of March 19th, 2020, and to submit requests for additional information as determined appropriate by the City Council.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Sam?
Well, I did submit my comments on that brief survey. The interim CEO, or the guy that came and talked with council, I hope he never leaves. I mean, it's like he's sitting there mirroring all of our comments back to us before we even opened our mouths. So I think that this is a good place to start. I think it's going to be a fluid discussion. He'll come in, we'll talk, we'll have topics then. But I think this is, if anybody wants to add on to that, great. But I'm good with what we've got.
Yeah, so the items that have been suggested are on page 131. Billing, collection, charge master, pricing, diagnostic, image scheduling, physician recruitment, new equipment services, and quarterly matrix is patient safety, patient experience, ED wait time, length of stay, discharge, readmission, and diabetes care measures.
So, Mr. Mayor,
yeah.
I think under the new equipment and services topic, I think for me, emergent care would be, I think that's something that he brought up when he was here. I mean, like it was mentioned earlier that the ER handles a lot of mental issues, and I have a daughter that's worked there, and I can tell you they're not set up for that. And so we have a lot of things that are going through that door that we're not really prepared to handle. And I think, when we talk about new services, I think emergent care is definitely one of them, and one of them is how do we handle our significantly, rapidly increasing mental issues that as I just drive in my neighborhood, drive down the street, I see. I mean, we have a problem.
Well, I think
and they all wind up here.
Well, I think that there is two different things here. One is, of course, report on what they are doing today and what their progress has and what has happened in the past, whereas the stuff you're talking about is probably part of the upcoming negotiations and packages that we'll be talking about. So
thank you.
What we're talking about is what kind of information do we want out of them in regards to how services have been provided and what they've upgraded. So if there's no changes or additions, and you're okay with the topics that are there, I'd call for a roll.
Your Honor?
Yeah.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Isn't it, my understanding, just from, I did the survey too, but don't we already have like Flora and council members on the committee with this? Are they meeting with that too, or?
Well, it wasn't a broad committee to carry it all the way through. I think it was in the exception of what we were doing regarding to picking the RFP and stuff, and then we on to another one. So we might be at a point now where we are looking at whether we continue with the same committee, we want to appoint another committee, or whatever you guys may want to do. It's entirely up to the council.
This is
Yes,
different
Judy.
though, right? This is just...
This right here, this is all presented to the council.
That's what I just was wondering.
Yeah.
You put me on
Oh, come on.
Would you please call the roll?
Coos?
Yes.
Gage?
Yes.
Zingy?
Yes.
Flora?
Yes.
Chapel?
Yes.
Bergeron?
Aye.
That passes. Moves us to the draft 2020-2023 Alaska State Transportation Improvement Plan, STIP. And I think the deadline has come and gone on getting things into the STIP. Is that correct, Carl, for the state of Alaska?
To get projects nominated, correct. If you want to make comment on the proposed STIP as it's presented here, that would be your opportunity. If you want to try to add a project, I would not be optimistic about getting it included, but we certainly can try.
So there's a full listing of projects, and where there's some Ketchikan projects in there, of course, and what their funding is and the timetable on moving into those. And so as you read through those on the project board, one of the things that was a major concern to me was some of the Tongass Avenue work just keeps getting put off year after year after year, and we're trying to address some of that and hopefully not move it off again, because now it's moved off to 2022. We had some conversations in Juneau about that, and their particular plan at that time was to do just a patch and fill operation, and we told them that wasn't going to work with the community, because this project really, some of the South Tonga stuff started back in the early 2000s. But there's quite a few projects in there in Ketchikan, and one of the things that you have to take into consideration in regard to some of the boroughs projects on the airport is where they may be listed here. Those are monies that were appropriated and passed through from the federal government in regards to bridge money, and it shouldn't really count as the total towards Ketchikan's share of DOT money for the STIP at this particular point in time, because it was designated to be used within 50 miles of the original project, and the borough has those funds in hands from past appropriations. So there's a motion there, right? In regards to it. So have we made that motion? Should we have a motion? And it's just in regard to drafts, anything that we want to do with it? Yes.
I move the City Council direct the City Manager to file such comments with the Department of Transportation and Public Facilities regarding the draft 2020 to 2023 statewide transportation improvement plan as determined appropriate by the City Council.
Second.
So in regards to that, and I talked to staff a little bit earlier today, I think that we need to make comments in regards to the proposed Tongass Avenue resurfacing stuff that's been moved out. And they have indicated while we're in Juneau that there's some money in an account that they can do some grind and resurface work with. But we didn't get a timetable. And I think it's important for the community that we get some of this stuff done earlier than later. And I don't know if we can make those comments in regards to this.
We've already submitted one letter. We certainly can submit another, because I think it's becoming a much more urgent situation.
It is.
So
it is.
We will do that.
And so I think that it's important that we get some kind of timetable back from them in regards to what's going on. And it's falling apart in front of us. And it's getting worse.
Don't disagree.
All right.
I could repeat myself, but you know.
And also, some of the conversations we had in regards to the upcoming projects and some of the infrastructure they want to put in the roads, such as the islands and stuff. I got communications back in regards to the federal highways, and they're not pushing it at all. It's not them. So it's all DOT. So, any other comments? Yes.
Yeah, to speak to that, when I was at the DOT meeting with the Fed guy, it's basically, they're supposed to be working with us.
Yeah.
It's There's no regulatory that requires those mediums to be put in. And it's really about working with us on what's going to be best and most effective for our community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please call the roll.
Zingy?
Yes.
Bergeron?
Aye.
Coos?
Yes.
Gage?
Yes.
Flora?
Yes.
Chapel?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Brings us to item 7A7, staff review semi-monthly parking permits.
Your Honor, I move the City Council direct the City Manager to take such action regarding the introduction of semi-monthly parking permits into the Police Department's parking permit program as determined appropriate by the City Council.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Carl?
Mr. Mayor, Finance Director, the Police Chief are here tonight to address any questions or concerns you may have. They reviewed the concept of implementing semi-monthly permits. They're both recommending it wouldn't be a wise move. I'll turn it over to them if they want to expand on that.
Good evening, Joe White, Chief of Police.
Good evening, Joe.
I'm here for questions.
So tell me how. So right now we have a monthly permit for $30 or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
So what the proposal here is to make a semi or a half a month available for $15. And to me, how do you track that? Because on a monthly permit, it's from the first of the month to the end of the month. So it's pretty easy to track in regards to the time period that you're looking at. And you do those, I think, now by color. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if you're, for 1 month, it's going to be blue, another one's going to be a red, and it's going to be yellow. So it's easily visible.
How like your tags at DMV, they give you a color code for your month and year so you can kind of tell what you're looking at, sure.
So when you guys looked at this, what was your thoughts about trying to do something for a small period of time within those months?
We talked to the park enforcement specialist, and what it comes down to is adding another 24 colors to the packets we already have. And in my opinion, and we offer fairly good parking permit program. You can get $1 a day for a month. You can do seasonal, April through September. You do yearly. So we already have those colors already designated. It's going to take more time to make sure that the permits are right. The parking enforcement person is going to have to spend a little more time. We do have a lot of issues with the parking permit program. People don't put them on their mirrors. They throw them on their dash. It's harder for her to find them. I mean, personally, I think that our parking rates are fairly reasonable. $1 a day is not out of line, I don't believe. In fact, I think it's on the lower end. When you look statewide, nationwide, we're not a big city by any means, but you go down south, the minute you get out of your car, you're paying for parking. You go to the airport lot, you don't get 2 hours free at the airport lot. You're paid. You get there, you're paying for the day. So I don't know if this is going to be that more conducive to people to buy a half-month parking permit. It would have to run, we talked to Bob, feasibly it would have to go from the 1st of the month to the 15th, and then 16th at the end of the month. Normally we give a grace period if somebody buys a month-long parking pass. Normally we give them a little grace period if they're going to renew that. But I think that our monthly rate is, like I said, extremely reasonable. And there's always 2-hour free parking. So they have the option of moving their car throughout the day. I mean, that's a hassle. I get it, and especially in the summertime, it's a hassle. But we have free parking that they can take advantage of too. So my personal recommendation would be no.
We also have 24-hour parking, right?
Yes.
On the top of the hills up here.
One of the biggest.
And then once you get past City Float or down there someplace, 2-hour parking goes away, or
it changes throughout the city. Yeah, I know we have different times for different areas. The harbors, give you 72 hours, I believe, because you go out here and go for the weekend stuff. Whatever. You're out in the summertime. had something that's going, sorry. I'm sorry.
Hey, Joe, so you can buy a day pass, where do you pick those up at?
I believe all the passes come from City Hall. We don't sell passes at the police department. Yeah, we don't sell them. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that we offer quite a bit of reasonable parking and different options for people that they can take advantage of. That would be where I would say it is.
Judy.
So, how many, what'd you call them, parking attendance specialists?
Parking enforcement specialist, I believe, is the job title.
How many of those do we have? Oh.
She's omniscient, ever present.
She needs a party.
We only need one.
So it came back to me. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
One of the bigger issues we have with the parking permits is people buy them, and maybe they are educated and they don't maybe understand, but they feel once they get the permit, that's good to go. They can just park wherever they want all day, and that's a fallacy. I mean, there's designated permit-only parking lots. So if you buy your permit, you're not going to be able to go park down on Front Street all day unless the sign says permit, in 2 hour permit parking. So that's kind of a misconception too.
Your Honor?
Yes.
I move to table this agenda item indefinitely.
I second that.
Question?
Question. Please call the roll on the table.
Okay. Coos?
Yes.
Gage?
Yes.
Zingy?
Yes.
Flora?
Yes.
Chapel?
Yes.
Bergeron?
Okay. Your Honor?
Yes.
5. Lead 5.
Give me 5, okay. We'll take 5. All right, so we'll come back to order here, and we go to item 7B1, budget transfer, purchase the Ketchikan Gateway Borough property lot 3B1 plat number 2063, containing approximately 7,900 square feet of land that is currently the site of the Telecommunication Division Mountain Point Remote Switch Facility. Do I have a motion?
Your Honor?
Yes.
Let's see, am I on the right one? Pursuant to section 3.12055, subsection A of the Ketchikan Municipal Code, I move the City Council approve the purchase of a portion of Ketchikan Gateway Borough on property located at Lot 3B1, plat number 2000-63, consisting of approximately 7,900 square feet of land for the purchase price of $30,000 plus the cost to survey and subdivide Lot 3B-1 into 2 lots. Authorized budget transfers of $30,000 and $7,500 respectively from the appropriated reserves of the KPU Enterprise Fund and the Telecommunications Division's 2020 Professional Services Engineering and Technical Account number 640-02 to the Telecommunication Division's 2020 Mountain Point Remote Switching Facility Land Acquisition Capital Account, and direct the City Manager to execute any property conveyance documents on behalf of the City Council.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Sam, do you have anything?
Now, I'm going to get an explanation from staff, or?
Carl or Ed?
Cushing, you want
to key us up on this?
So Ed Cushing, Telecommunications Division Manager.
So what are we doing here, Ed, with this purchase? It's a property we've been using for a long period of time, is it not?
Over 30 years.
Okay.
So roughly 1983, I believe it was, the Telecommunications Division signed a 30-year lease with the borough. Presently, the borough owns this land. To put it in context, the Telecommunications Division operates one main switching operation at 2970 Tongass, up behind the Public Works building, and that's where we have our main electronic facility. Main facility houses our electronics, and all of our cabling plant comes together. Then out on North Tongass as well as out on South Tongass, we operate some smaller facilities where our fiber optic cables and copper cables come together, and we also have a suite of electronics. So at the Mountain Point facility, we operate electronics and a cabling meet point, and we serve the majority of the folks on South Tongass from that office with internet, dial tone, and other telecom services. Do the same thing out north. the lease expired on this building about 3 years ago. And for the last 3 years, we've gone back and forth with borough staff about should we have a new lease, should we buy it, exactly what should we do. Well, it wasn't until about 2 months ago that it became clear that the borough was willing to sell us the property. Owning that property is far superior to continuing to lease it. I should mention that this is also the place where our new undersea fiber will come up out of the ocean and terminate, and then we'll have to operate the electronics in the Mountain Point hut or Mountain Point building for that subsea fiber. So it's a very important building for us and a very important location. And to ever contemplate moving it to a different location, we don't want to have that conversation. Very, very expensive and impractical to move that wire center, move those electronics someplace else. $30,000 is a great deal. We should take it and own that facility and not continue to lease it. My recommendation.
So do we have an easement to get the fiber optic cable up to it?
Yes. So we do have an easement to come up out of the ocean, and then there are existing conduits on an existing lease under North Tongass. So we're clear to get over there.
Good. Any other questions? Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Thanks. Please call the roll.
Gage?
Yes.
Zingy?
Yes.
Flora?
Yes.
Chapel?
Yes.
Bergeron?
Aye.
Coos?
Yes.
Thank you. Brings us to item 7B2, request for a 90-day extension to DNR comment period, Metlakatla Power and Light application for a non-exclusive private easement for the installation of a submarine electrical fiber optic utility cable between Net and Revilla de Guerrero Island.
Your Honor.
Yes.
I move the City Council authorize the General Manager to request DNR to extend the comment period regarding Metlakatla Power and Light's application to the Department of Natural Resources for a non-exclusive private easement for the installation of a submarine electric fiber optic utility cable between Annette and Revilla Islands for an additional 90 days to address such issues as detailed in staff's report dated February 13th, 2020.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Mark, you have anything?
Not much, Your Honor. I would just have a question for the General Manager as to the gentleman's earlier comment tonight about a shorter comment period, but that's about all I got.
We did receive that request this afternoon. It was also a reference from Metlakatla Power and Light that from their perspective, they didn't see SEPA being an involved entity in this discussion. I don't agree with that. I think SEPA will be very much an involved entity. I think given the fact that there's no agreement as to how that cable will be connected to Ketchikan's grid, there's no power sales agreement between us and Metlakatla Power and Light, I think 90 days is a sufficient period of time to ask to get some of these issues addressed so we know what we're dealing with. And my recommendation would be that to keep it as is.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah.
I got hundreds of questions on this one. Does Metlakatla want to sell power, or does Metlakatla want to buy power? What are we doing here?
Yvonne, if you'd come up. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, so I want to start off and say that I know this has been something that's been sort of ongoing, discussed for 20 plus years at this point. The general idea of this project has been in the works. The reason we're trying to move forward with it on our end now is because the firm that I work for, Baker Tilly, we came in and kind of looked at it and quickly changed a few things that made it financially feasible on Metlakatla's side. So on the question of if we want to buy or sell power, I guess our idea is more of a kind of bilateral tariff given the load changes for both entities, it would allow, I guess, flexibility for it to go either way. Obviously, currently, our greater need would be to purchase power from Ketchikan. So we would like to think of ourselves as a large industrial customer of Ketchikan's utilities, but then with some sort of tariff in place to negotiate if power needs change in the future. To answer that question. And
So, if I can just speak for a couple of minutes, I've looked at Mid Island's hydro capabilities. They've got Triangle Lake. They've got a few smaller hydro projects that are developable, and because they're on native land, they don't really necessarily need to go through the FERC process. So that as far as being able to develop these projects, they could do that in a relatively short amount of time. The other thing that Metlakatla has going for it is that it has a lot of flat, developable land, which lends itself to commercial activities, which could include secondary and tertiary treatment of mine activities. It could be a sawmill. It could be fish processing. It could be things like that. But what I know about Metlakatla is that they have hydro resources, but they're pretty much maxed out with what they've got, just with the folks that are living there. And so if they wanted to develop an industrial site, they would need more power. They'd either need to connect to us and buy our surplus, or develop their own resources. And for somebody who spent a couple of years in Las Vegas and saw what happened when they developed their hydro resources, we got Las Vegas, I mean, the whole area just completely, developed. And so I think it's in our best interest to look at this, figure out what we need to do for an agreement for bilateral whatever. I'm fully supportive of it because I think it will add to our economic development. I think people are going to look at what Metlakatla is. It's a really, truly beautiful place with a lot of potential, and they just need the power cord to get it going. So I was really excited to see this, and I know we got some things to work out, and I'm hoping that we can do that. That's all I got.
Thank you. Yeah, me.
So when you guys talk about tariffs, are you looking at some of the government funding available for the reservation, or is that, are there any of those tariffs like they do power matching and equating out in the villages up north? Is that kind of what you're looking for? For example, like in Kotzebue, because of the cost of power, they have wind. But they also, so that people are not spending $300, almost $1,000 a month, they are literally, there's a cost efficiency through the state. And it's a tariff that helps compensate that cost of power. I don't know if that's something that, when you say tariff, that's what I'm thinking of.
No, so it's more of just more of a supply and demand type agreement of how much it would cost for power to flow, which direction, based on whatever. And I mean that's kind of.
Well, I know you guys have the same drought we had, so I'm assuming
Yes.
that's what you guys are
Yes.
worried about.
Exactly, because we there's a couple things that you brought up that I'd like to touch on that allows me to go into that. So you mentioned kind of Triangle Lake and some other hydro projects that are developable. In all reality, those aren't really developable. I mean, technically, physically they would be, but financially they're not. One of the reasons that this intertie now works is they've been trying to develop Triangle Lake Hydro as part of that intertie for the last 18, 20 years that they started with it, and we came in and we're pretty much meeting like that just doesn't work.
So can you share with us what that dollar amount was, or is that proprietary about what it would cost to develop it?
I could, if I knew that number off the top of my head, I would be more than happy to share that information with you. Yeah, it was. And I don't even want to say anything because I don't want to say anything wrong. But I will say that it substantially changed the economics of the project, moving it from just something that was never going to happen. They had previous consultants come in before we started working with them that pretty much said, if you get this project 80% funded with grants, then it's financially feasible. Okay, but there's no one that's going to fund 80% of this hydro project over there. And then, as you said, with other large loads that could potentially start on the island, fish processing, sawmill, things like that, that's another thing, another point to make, is that load hopefully will increase for their economic development. But they're maxing out those hydros sometimes, and other than hydro, they're just running diesel, which, as you all know, is very expensive to run. And there were some previous issues with the utility that are since being corrected, and so there are some issues with the diesel, and that should be corrected for the future. But diesel still just is not economically efficient. Most likely it would be cheaper to potentially buy power as a customer from Ketchikan than try to continue to run diesel if there's no hydro available.
So for us, and that's all great fine for plans for Metlakatla, but the city of Ketchikan has its own responsibilities, and we went into a diesel burn due to a lack of hydro. We also have a power sales agreement with SEPA, and they are a big part of the power that we receive. And so adding another customer, how does that work in the stack, and what happens if we draw hydros to a point where we're running diesels in the winter, is all of an issue. And then again, of course, it's the land connections, the wheeling agreements, everything else that goes along with that. So I think that in regards to the city's position, I think that the 90 days is warranted. If we can get it done sooner than that, we could probably petition to move forward. But I think that there's a lot of information, and I've been in these projects before, and it takes a long time to get the information that you need, and I don't think we're going to get it in 30 days. So I would agree that the 90 days is probably appropriate. If we find ourselves in a position where we got all the information we need, we can let them know and change the schedule if that's necessary. So I would recommend we stay with the 90.
Sure. Okay. And I would just like to say that we will, we'll work whatever information requested from us. We'll work to get that to you as expediently as we can on our end. Any meetings or calls or discussions that to be had where we kind of actually get all the stakeholders together, we're willing to make the trip up or down or wherever we're coming from to Ketchikan, or set up calls and do whatever needs to be done to continue to keep this project moving forward. Because the longer it sits around, kind of the less likely it is that it's going to keep moving. So
I'll assure you that our staff will work diligently at working with you in order to get the information that we need. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing and hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Chapel?
Yes.
Bergeron?
Yes.
Coos?
Yep.
Gage? Yes. Zingy?
Yes.
Flora?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 8, which is vouchers.
Do we have vouchers still?
We don't have anything listed, so it moves us on to the manager's report. Carl.
Several. Following up on the discussion with Mrs. Mackey this evening, if it's the council's intent to adopt the Tourism Best Management Practices program and then extend it to, as a condition of permits that we issue either out of the clerk's office or out of the Port and Harbor Director's office, that may require a code amendment, and I need to get Mitch on that now, if that's your intent, if you're really trying to get we're running out of time relative to the 2020 season, so any direction that the council can give.
Well, I think that it's going to take a while to just do the training, get the plan implemented and that kind of stuff. And I think the permit stuff can come after the fact and maybe in the next season, so we don't push up against that. So I don't know that the joint is probably at this particular point. I guess four hands from the council in regards to that, but I don't think that would be the direction.
I think just seeing how it goes this year and then.
We gave you a report that contained a draft letter relative to continuation of the Ocean Ranger program as was requested at the last meeting. We also then included a bill that is now being circulated in the legislature relative to a CPB funded environmental compliance program. I guess we're looking for direction from the council whether you want us to move forward with submitting the letter to the governor.
If I can expand on that a little bit. So we talked about this when we were in Juneau with Ben Stevens, and Ben is the special assistant to the governor. He has a tremendous amount of maritime experience. He made his livelihood on the water. And in regards to the Ocean Rangers, they've had these guys on the boat, and really they've had very little reports coming out of it. Hasn't really brought anything extraordinary forward with all the time that they spent on there. And given the fact that the newer ships, and even the older ones now, all of those valving systems and stuff that are on them are electronically controlled, and they have an electronic log in regards to when they open, when they close, that type of stuff. So the state of Alaska believes there is a process by which they could correlate that information in a report system so that they can see how they're managing their systems aboard the ship. And plus, they would still have to be required to do the sampling and monitoring and shipping them out for stuff like that. So he thinks there's a more efficient way to monitor that is going to be as good, if not better, than putting the Ocean Rangers on the boat. So they're moving forward with a plan to do that. The other part of it is that, and I believe it was Clea that introduced the bill, and it's a House bill right now, and they're proposing that after they get these programs in place and whatever expense it takes to operate them, manage them, report them, do whatever they do with them, that there will probably be some funds left over, and they're actually proposing to add another $1 to it to bring it from $4 to $5. And then this is money, of course, collected from the cruise ship, and that has been used in the Ocean Rangers program, which is a state operation. The new draft information in regards to the excess dollars, it's not really clear about who gets the use of that money. In other words, to me, it means that it may be able to go directly to a private operator for a wastewater system on a facility he's building or advancing or proposing. And as with all the other CPB monies, it's very pointed in the fact that they have to come back to the 7 ports of call and be used for public purposes. And so if they're going to do this, I think that one of the rewrites should be that it comes back to the local communities, notwithstanding that if there's wastewater issues that are going to cause environmental issues, that they could submit to the local communities for grants or loans. But I think to just leave this wide open so that it can go anywhere, it could go to, again, anywhere and be proposed by anybody else. So I think that, and I think the bottom line is that they want to clean up some of these wastewater issues, but I think that in the private sector, if they're building into something, I don't know that money collected for a public person should be used in private properties. I think there's some work to be done on it. Dick?
Yeah, this bill here is they've written it, to me, is confusing because it says at one point I never seen them do away with the Ocean Rangers in the first place. And then it says they're going to impose a compliance fee of $5 per berth on each ship that operates in the waters. Okay, my question is this a new fee or is this the old fee? I didn't even realize there was a separate $5 fee for Ocean Rangers.
It's $4 and they're going to up it to $5 from what I understand.
But they didn't do away with the old one yet. And then it says they're going to reduce it by $1 per vessel or berth if that particular ship installs and operates blah, blah, blah. So I think the bill is blah, blah, blah right now until they clarify what's going on. And I don't know whether we should write a letter saying we want to keep the Ocean Rangers, but we need to find out and keep track of what they're doing because we may want to protest later. I mean, this somebody's playing a game. I don't know what the game is, but I don't know who it's benefiting.
Generally.
Yeah, I agree with Coos. The bill is very vague. It also, this is funds it's public funds that was voted on, and specifically for this program. And I tend to think that having the Ocean Rangers is the reason they're not reporting is because there's actually oversight on the ships. Whether some people find that maybe they're not, they're just having a great trip or whatever, but some of these entities that are pushing this bill are some of our biggest contributors to polluting and being fined for those pollutions, not necessarily in Alaska, but outside in other waters. And Alaska has this oversight, and I think that's, to me, that if we're not getting the report, if there's not complaints, it means there's that oversight. That means they're complying because they got somebody watching them. I agree. I have a hard time understanding how you can take CPV funds after we've been told you can't use it for private or our own sewer systems that benefit our people, but it has to go back to the cruise ship, and yet now we have a bill that's kind of vaguely saying, oh, we're going to give it to you to fix your septic systems. I don't know. I stick with the letter for now and just keep an eye on them because it's a mess. Like who said, it's...
And I think there's some language in here in regards to spending them in a fashion and then not being able to, I guess, say that they're utilized just for the at-birth stuff. So,
Bob, can we direct our lobbyist in Juneau to keep track of this thing so that it keeps us tuned in so we know how we want to jump? I mean, it should be something up there he's watching for us, and we need to probably give him the direction.
well, that's up to the council, but I don't see why not. But I think that we need to have a better understanding of this bill, and we need to have somebody look at it. What do you think, Carl?
I don't know if this is going to align with what I'm hearing from Councilmember Coos and Councilmember Gage. We can revise the letter to express our concerns about the elimination of the Ocean Ranger program and note that there is now a bill that's been introduced. If that does in fact replace the Ocean Ranger program, incorporate our concerns about maintaining it for public entities versus private entities, if you want to try to merge the two. I don't think you can support the Ocean Ranger program and support this proposed bill concurrently because they're at odds. But I don't know what the legislature is going to do. If the bill isn't acted on, I think what I'm hearing is the council wants to endorse continuation of the Ocean Ranger program. If the Ocean Ranger program goes away, we want to make sure what replaces it is designed for the public entities that CPV was originally intended for.
Yeah, and I don't think there's been a accurate description of what's replacing the Ocean Rangers.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
So Bob, so what an ocean ranger is a licensed engineer, marine engineer, licensed by the Coast Guard to monitor the activities of what goes on with their wastewater. So if there's a problem with them not reporting, then I think we should work on the problem. But I think that if you have systems that can be manipulated and left up to industry, that we're having a far less reliable and accurate representation of what's truly going on with that thing. For me, I want bodies on the ship. I want people observing, and whatever we can do to ensure that we don't get gray water and things like that where they shouldn't go. I certainly am for maintaining what we have.
Yeah, I don't think the fact is that they're not reporting. I just don't think there's been a lot that they have reported that have been extreme violations. You do have some isolated stuff that I think for the majority part.
Which could speak to the effectiveness of the program.
Right.
Isn't this kind of this proposed bill, the industry saying, don't worry, we got it?
Yeah.
So we should just, I agree with Councilmember Bergeron. I have kind of a problem with Clay or whoever via the governor, the House Rules Committee, saying, yeah, it's all good. If there haven't been a lot of noted egregious violations, doesn't that speak to the fact that it works?
Carl's suggestion may be a good way to go, is to modify the letter saying we're concerned, but we need to know more about however you want to word it to say there's something wrong here, but we're still leaning toward making sure the waters are good and so forth.
Given
Whatever
the
way.
nature of the discussion, if the council is happy with the letter as drafted, I think we should submit it, and then I can instruct our lobbyists relative to the concerns I've heard tonight about the draft legislation and tell him to keep monitoring it. This is what we're looking for.
So I would suggest that we eliminate our parking enforcement along with the same thing that we did. Because I promise not to ever illegally park.
Can we just call them parking rangers?
You're the one that drive over the stop.
Okay, so we have given the manager direction. Do we have four hands? Okay, that's the way we'll proceed with that.
I know it's getting late and we still have a lot to do. We didn't include a report on what's being done locally relative to the coronavirus. Both Chief Hogue and Port and Harbor's director are here tonight. If the council has questions that they want to address, this would be the time to do it.
Well, I'd like to call them up and just give us a little bit of a brief. Chief, if you could kind of give us an idea. I do understand that the majority of the cruise industry comes out of a larger port that will also have a larger program in how they manage this. But if you and Steve could elaborate a little bit about where we're at, because I think we've had a pretty good plan in place, and it's just kind of dusting it off and seeing how it works, right?
Admiral Hogue, Fire Chief and Emergency Manager. So we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow with all of the different stakeholders that would be involved with any potential incident. We have, in addition to what was on the letter that was submitted, I've spoken to the CDC quarantine station out of Anchorage, and they're going to be involved in the conversation tomorrow. And the public health emergency response operations staff will be involved in that discussion as well. There are plans in place to deal with these types of communicable diseases. Try to say that 3 times fast. And so the coronavirus is not that different than many of the other communicable diseases that we respond to already. The flu, SARS, and MERS that have happened in the past are the same types of procedures, precautionary procedures taken, prevention of spread procedures that are taken. So we really do have plans that address most of this already. What we're doing tomorrow is getting all of the stakeholders in the same room to have the discussion and make sure that we're not missing anything. But like I said, I've looked at most of those plans already, and I think we're in a good place right now. So we'll have that meeting, we'll go through the information, and then we'll probably put some information together to get out to the public and additional information for the elected officials as well. As far as the situation with coronavirus right now, if you're not following the news, which most of us are, there have been 467 persons, they call it a person under investigation in the U.S. when they are suspected of having the coronavirus. Of those, only 15 have tested positive in the United States so far. 392 were negative and 60 are pending, and that was as of yesterday afternoon. Local changes that we've done within the city already is our medical director has provided some guidance for the 911 dispatchers to do additional screening on any callers that are reporting fevers or respiratory symptoms or nausea, vomiting, gastrointestinal type symptoms. So they'll ask additional questions if they have a caller that has that information, and then they'll pass that on to our responding crews so that they can take the appropriate precautions. And then he's also provided us additional information on how to respond, what PPE to use, and then to make sure that we report that to the hospital in advance of arrival.
Any questions?
Wash your hands.
Did I miss anything?
So, Chief Hope, how does our first responders protect themselves beyond what they would normally do when they're encountering folks off the cruise ships and things?
Sure. So normally we use PPE all the time, depending on what the nature of the illness is. We always use rubber gloves, medical gloves, but we don't always use masks. We don't necessarily always use eye protection, and we don't always use gowns or coveralls, right? But in this case, if we had a suspected incident or someone suspected of having the coronavirus, those are the additional items that we add in that case, as well as some ventilation procedures in the ambulance to make sure that all of that is going out of the ambulance. And then you also put a mask on the patient so that if they're coughing or sneezing, the mask that's on them is containing that particulate that they're discharging.
So would that person be removed from the cruise ship and then brought into our medical facilities, or if we had... So if we come across a case that we're suspect on?
That'll be part of the discussion tomorrow, but in general, I guess it depends on what the situation is. You've heard of cruise ships that have been quarantined currently when they have suspected case on board, and if that happens, the CDC through the U.S. and the U.S. Coast Guard are already working together and monitoring vessels that are out there. Today, they're monitoring vessels coming to Alaska and wherever they're going. And there's requirements already in place for reporting under maritime law for those vessels if they have a sick person on board. The CDC gets that information. They could order a quarantine of that vessel. And if that's the case, then we're probably not bringing that patient off of the vessel.
Would that load tie-up, Steve?
Port and Harbors Director Steve Corporon. Just elaborating a little bit on what Abner was saying, current protocols for like norovirus, flu, things like that, they don't have to report individual cases. They have to track individual cases, but they have to report to the CDC when they reach a certain percentage, whether it be 5%, 10%. For coronavirus, if I understand it correctly, they will have to report individual cases. And then it's going to be up to the CDC and the captain of the port, which for us is Captain White in Juneau, on making the decisions on where ships go, where they will tie up, where they won't tie up, and that.
That's a big responsibility this year.
Yes, but I know there's been stuff going around in social media where the ships can hide this stuff. They won't be telling, the CDC is telling us what's going on, but they will be, and if they get caught not telling it, it's going to be very bad for them. So, especially with the coronavirus, they have to make individual notifications. So, each line has different screening procedures. They're very similar. Most of the differences that we've noticed in the protocols that have been coming out is on the amount of time they won't let somebody on if they've been within, contact with someone who came from China within the last 14 days or 15 days or 30 days. That's about the only real difference I've seen in the protocols between the lines. But most of them are very similar, and they're being very strict on their screenings, trying to keep any cases off the boats. And since we aren't generally the first port of call in the U.S., for these, we shouldn't be all of a sudden exposed to a large issue here, since they're going to have to be coming through other ports up and down the West Coast or from up north before they get to here. So,
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Thank you, guys.
Two more, Mr. Mayor, very quickly, just to let the council know, the mayor and I and Water Division staff will be going up to Anchorage to meet with ADEC on March 4th relative to our compliance order by consent. We did have the opportunity this morning to meet with Larry Burton, who's Chief of Staff of Senator Sullivan, and we did brief him as to what the issues are. And then a couple meetings ago, the council tasked us to take a look internally about what we could possibly do relative to the issue of street lighting in the downtown. I'd like Mr. Bynum to come up very quickly to give a 30-second summary of what we're doing. So, Jeremy, it's all yours.
Thank you, sir. Jeremy Bynum, Systems Engineer for KPU Electric. As you guys obviously know, there was the request to evaluate what's happening in the downtown area with regard to lighting. We've been evaluating that. So as of to date, what we've done so far is we've cataloged all the lighting that belongs to KPU, and we've done a few things. So first thing that we've done is we've made sure that we went through and made sure all the lighting is working. And those lights that you might find now that aren't working, they're being worked on. The second thing that we did is that we've taken a lot of our Sternbergs in the downtown area that aren't along the highway, and we've upgraded those to a higher luminaire so that they put out more light. And so those are two of the immediate things that we've done with regard to the lighting. We've also contacted Juno to have some conversations with them, and those conversations are ongoing about what they actually do there for their lighting. And we are looking at other options to present to the council as far as some of the lower lit areas. But so far, I think that if you've looked in the areas, that some of those areas are more well lit. We've also, along Tangas Highway, updated all of the lighting between berth 4 and just past the tunnel to LED lighting. That's been obvious, but I know that the fire department and the police department noticed that and wanted to make note of that. So here to answer any other additional questions. We are putting together a report for you guys to address all of the issues with regard to it and some suggestions.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions?
Just a comment that I appreciate you getting all the streetlights working because, we live downtown, and when the streetlights on the corner on those old-fashioned lights aren't working and there's no building lights on the Heckman building, it's dark and it's dangerous. And so I appreciate those getting back up. And I think we talked about at one time making it part of the code that we have building lights that light up off your buildings.
Bringing forward options for council consideration. There's more to come. So we just wanted to let you know what we're doing.
I have noticed one thing driving tonight. I noticed it was brighter. And I also noticed some of the businesses that aren't open have their lights on. So maybe they heard, I don't know, maybe it was just a fluke, but I noticed that down by the movie theater further down. Yeah, it was very nice. So.
And obviously, anytime you guys have questions, just let us know. We'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. City Clerk's file?
None, Your Honor.
City Attorney's file? He was here. I saw him walk through one. Future agenda items. Mayor and council comments. Dick?
None, Your Honor.
Ken Lee?
None, Your Honor.
Sam?
Nothing, that I'm just glad to be affiliated with such a professional organization as the City of Ketchikan. You know, I've served on a lot of deliberative bodies, but throughout our whole management structure and the guys in the field, this place rocks. You guys do a good job. Thanks.
Thank you. Emily?
No comments.
Judy?
No comment.
Mark?
Nothing, Your Honor.
I have a couple of comments. One of them is in regards to the meeting that we had last night, and there was some comments made about the structure that we have in regards to management and who and what and how it got changed and between having a utility manager and a city manager. And I think that the fact is that people don't realize that there was a huge cost saving in doing that in regards to, one, not just the other manager, but there was also a complete finance department at that particular point in time and other staff available. So there was quite a reduction, and I don't remember what the exact number was. But over the period of time that we've had a single manager, we saved a considerable amount of money in that manner. And then there was also some comments about pay ranges and all that kind of stuff. And the city council makes those recommendations. He's our employee. And it's not out of line with some of his counterparts in other agencies and communities. So I just wanted to bring that to clarification that, you know, the city of Ketchikan has a process by which they do this, and we've been following it, and I'm very happy with where we're at today. So. Is there any other new business that we can think of at this particular point in time? Having none, bring us to item 15, what is the executive session. Item 15A is request for executive session contract number 19-02 consulting services for the lease of the Ketchikan Medical Center ECG management consultant.
Your Honor.
Yes.
I move the City Council declare consistent with the City Manager's report dated February 7, 2020. It is in the best interest of the City Council to discuss a draft updated lease and operating agreement term sheet pertaining to pending negotiations between the City and Peace Health for a new Ketchikan Medical Center lease agreement in executive session in accordance with KMC 2.0.025 subsection A subsection 1 and A subsection 3, which includes the need to discuss subjects the knowledge of which could have an immediate adverse impact on the finances of the city and to receive legal advice within the attorney-client privilege.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Zingy.
Yes.
Flora.
Yes.
Chapel.
Yes.
Bergeron.
Yes.
Goose.
Yep.
Gage.
Yes.
That motion passes. We will now move into executive session. So we'll come back to order. We met in the executive session, discussed items with ECG management consultants, gave our manager direction, and so that's that. Moves us on to item B, Ketchikan Public Utilities, B1. Request executive session discussion, negotiate strategies relative to the city's request to reopen the current collective bargaining agreement between the City of Ketchikan and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 1547, to address issues associated with journeyman lineman retention and the IBEW employer-employee retirement plan contribution rates. Do I have a motion?
Your Honor.
Yes.
I move the City Council declare that consistent with the General Manager's memorandum dated February 10th, 2020, it's in the best interest of the city to discuss the status of the city's request to reopen the current collective bargaining agreements between the City of Ketchikan and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 1547, to address issues associated with journeyman lineman retention and the IBEW employer-employee retirement plan contribution rates in executive session. In accordance with that finding, the City Council go into executive session in accordance with Ketchikan Municipal Code 2 Manager's Memorandum, which matters include the need to discuss subjects the knowledge of which would have an adverse impact upon the finances of the city and upon the city's ability to negotiate favorable labor settlements.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Gage?
Yes.
Zingy?
Yes.
Flora?
Yes.
Chapel?
Yes.
Bergeron?
Aye.
Coos?
All right. We'll move into All right, we'll come back to order. We met in executive session. We gave the manager direction to meet with the assistant business manager and the lineman. And so that brings us on to the next section, which is item 15B2. A request for an executive session claim of Randy Galloway Jr. Do I have a motion?
Your Honor,
Yes.
move the City Council declare that consistent with the City Attorney's memorandum dated February 11th, 2020, it's in the best interest of the city to discuss Randy Galloway Jr.'s property damage claim and give direction to the City Attorney in handling the matter in executive session in accordance with Ketchikan Municipal Code 204025A1A and 3, which includes the need to discuss subjects the knowledge of which could have an immediate adverse impact on the finances of the city, and to receive legal advice within the attorney-client privilege.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Coos?
Yes.
Gage? Yes. Zingy?
Yes.
Flora?
Yes.
Chapel?
Yes.
Bergeron?
With that,